The desert night was supposed to be silent, but silence had long since been stolen. Gunfire cracked through the air like the snapping of dry bones, and smoke clung to the ground in suffocating waves. A squad of Marines crouched low behind a wall of broken concrete, their faces streaked with sweat, dust, and despair. They had been pinned for hours, their ammunition dwindling, their strength tested beyond measure. Even the toughest among them began to whisper the truth they didn't want to admit: this was the end. But then, in the distance, a sound rose above the chaos. Not the rattle of enemy rifles. Not the screaming of mortars. No, it was the deep, powerful thump of rotor blades cutting through the night sky. At first, the Marines thought it was just the desert playing tricks on them, hope mocking their exhaustion. But when the shadows shifted, and a black helicopter emerged against the burning horizon, their despair turned into something else, something close to disbelief. At the controls sat Captain Elena Ramirez, a 32-year-old pilot with dark, determined eyes that never blinked when danger bore down on her. She had been warned before takeoff: the situation was hopeless. The Marines were surrounded, the enemy had anti-air weapons, and the ground was a nightmare of chaos. Other pilots had shaken their heads. Even the battle-hardened commanders had sighed and said, "There's nothing left to do. We've already lost them." But Elena didn't believe in lost causes. Not ever. She pulled her helmet tight, adjusted her grip on the controls, and whispered a promise into the night air: "Not on my watch." The Marines on the ground had no way of knowing the kind of woman flying toward them. To them, she was just a shadow in the sky, a lifeline they had already given up on. But Elena's life had been forged in storms long before this night. She had grown up the daughter of a mechanic in a small Texas town. From the time she was 10, she was climbing into the cockpits of broken crop dusters and pretending the cracked dials were instruments guiding her into battle. People told her she'd never make it. Too poor. Too small. Too female. She carried those doubts on her shoulders all the way into flight school, where she had to fight harder than anyone just to be seen. By the time she earned her wings, she didn't just know how to fly a helicopter, she knew how to bend the sky to her will. But nothing in her life had prepared her for this moment. Below her, the Marines were breaking. Sergeant Tom Briggs, a man with arms like iron and a heart that had carried his men through 3 deployments, found himself staring at the sand with trembling hands. He was out of options. Out of miracles. "Sir," one of his men whispered, "what do we do?" Briggs opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. The enemy was closing in, their war cries cutting through the smoke like knives. He almost wanted to tell his men to pray, though he hadn't prayed in years. Then, before he could speak, a roar filled the sky. Dust exploded around them as the helicopter swooped down. The Marines ducked, eyes wide. They had expected retreat. Instead, what they saw was fire. Elena's bird didn't land. It danced. She swung the chopper low and sideways, blades chewing the air with ferocity. The enemy, who had been so sure of victory, staggered back as her machine lit up the night. Bullets sprayed from her mounted guns, cutting arcs through the darkness. But this wasn't random fire, it was controlled chaos, a storm she directed with surgical precision. She turned her helicopter into a living, breathing beast of war, shielding the Marines below with every maneuver. "She's crazy," one Marine shouted, eyes wide with awe. "No," Briggs whispered, finally finding his voice. "She's saving us." The fight stretched on, and the challenges grew heavier with every passing minute. Elena's helicopter shuddered as rounds tore into the fuselage. Warning lights blinked red on her console. Her co-pilot screamed over the radio, "We can't keep this up, Captain. We're going to fall out of the sky." But Elena's jaw tightened. She thought of the Marines trapped below, of the families back home waiting for sons, brothers, fathers who would never return if she quit now. She thought of the commanders who had said it wasn't possible, and of the girl she once was, the one who had been told to give up before she had even started. Her hands didn't let go. She flew harder. Faster. More precise. "Then we'll fall like lightning," she said, and pulled the stick so sharply the helicopter spun into a maneuver pilots called reckless, but she called survival. The enemy didn't know how to fight her storm. Finally, the Marines heard the words they had prayed for. Extraction inbound. Move now. A second helicopter arrived, then another, swooping in under the cover Elena had carved through the battlefield. The Marines sprinted through smoke and fire, carrying their wounded, pushing past their fear. Briggs turned one last time, watching the lone helicopter holding the line, its silhouette burning against the desert flames. He would never forget it. When the last Marine was aboard and the dust began to settle, Elena finally let her helicopter drift back. Her machine was torn, her body shaking from the hours of strain, but she was alive, and more importantly, so were the men who had been abandoned by hope itself. As the Marines climbed out of their transports hours later, safe but broken with exhaustion, Briggs sought her out. He found her standing beside the battered chopper, helmet tucked under her arm, eyes scanning the horizon like she wasn't finished fighting yet. He walked up to her, his voice rough. "We'd already given up. Even the Marines." "But you," he stopped, because words felt too small. Elena just smiled, a tired, quiet smile. "Storms don't give up, Sergeant. They only hit harder." That night, every man who had survived carried a new story back home. They told of a battle they should not have walked away from. They told of despair turned to fire. And they told of a female pilot who turned her helicopter into a storm, refusing to let them die. And somewhere, far away, a little girl might have heard that story, and thought to herself, if she can do it, maybe I can too. If you're watching this right now, let me ask you something. What storms in your life have you faced? Have you ever felt surrounded, hopeless, like there was no way out? Remember this story when that moment comes. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of courage, one person refusing to give up, to change everything. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, tell me what part of this story touched you most, or share a time when you refused to give up even when the odds were against you. And if you want more powerful, emotional stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our family here on Be Kind Always. Because together, we can carry these lessons, share these stories, and remind each other that even in the darkest battles, storms can rise.